just curious, what would the negative hormonal effects be from using things like avocado oil, sunflower oil, all those types of oils? What would those negative effects be?
Yeah. So great question. My concern with sunflower, safflower, corn, canola, soybean, grapeseed is based on the amount of linoleic acid in those oils. This is going to get a little technical. Hold on to your butts. This is an 18 carbon omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid. And what we know very clearly is that a molecule of fat, though all molecules of fat are give or take 9 calories per gram, they have very different physiologic, I would say hormonal, lipokine effects in the human body. Stearic acid is an 18 carbon saturated fat, meaning all the carbons are connected by a single bond. Linoleic acid is an 18 carbon omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid, meaning there are multiple carbon to carbon bonds that are double bonds. People may say, what's the big deal? It's just a few electrons here or there and some pi orbital somewhere. Like I learned about this in organic chemistry. Who gives a shit? The molecules take a completely different shape and they appear to bind to different receptors. They appear to have different hormonal effects in the human body. And what appears to be the case, and this is a controversial hypothesis, but I really believe this. The more I dig into it, the more I believe this is the center of human chronic health issues, is that when we get above a certain level of linoleic acid in the human body, probably an evolutionarily appropriate level of linoleic acid, this 18 carbon polyunsaturated fat, our biochemistry just goes off the rails, probably through some sort of hormonal effects, whether it's in the adipocyte, so the fat cell and the fat cell membrane, whether it's in mitochondrial membranes, whether it's in nuclear membranes. You can make cases for all of those pieces of the all of those pieces of the pathology. But what we know very clearly about insulin resistance, a condition also known as metabolic dysfunction that most physicians would say lies at the root of the majority of chronic illness. I would say this is probably the number one offender of chronic illness in humans: cancer, dementia, autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease. It's all insulin resistance at the root. And I think that we know that that is connected with broken fat cells. So fat cells, your adipocytes, rule everything about your metabolic flexibility and your insulin sensitivity, because those fat cells release inflammatory mediators, they release lipokines, and they release non-esterified fatty acids into the blood. And what we know is when those fat cells release non-esterified fatty acids into the blood, the body becomes insulin resistant. This is a normal physiology that gets badly broken.
I got a question, teacher. I got a question. So what happens if we consume some of these things, but we just don't overeat? Do we avoid—
You mean in terms of calories or absolute amounts of linoleic acid?
Do we potentially avoid some of the disasters of what you're talking about with insulin resistance if we end up consuming some of these things, but we don't end up overeating?
You mean in terms of absolute amounts of calories?
Yes, basically, yeah.
That appears to mitigate some of the problems. My problem with that is that humans don't like to be in prison, whether it's San Quentin or calorie prison. They all suck. And that evolutionarily, if you put yourself in calorie prison, you'll eventually break out. Your body won't stay there forever, and you'll be, I think, in a bad spot.
There's some people that are a little disinterested in food, though, right? Like there's some people that like— something I've been observing is like, I just have some friends that they just don't care that much about food. They're like, I went through the day. I didn't notice anything. I forgot to eat. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? What does that even mean? That you forgot to eat? I think about food nonstop. So I believe that some of these people can maybe avoid some of what you're talking about to some degree. But maybe over time, maybe it does catch up to you, especially as we get older. Maybe it catches up to you because we're eating these things that are unhealthy. But I think if you're just not overeating, maybe you're not put in the same category, and maybe you don't end up with as much of a shitty metabolism in the end if you don't overeat.
It's possible. I think that the mechanisms are also linked. So Nsima, you asked about how does this act hormonally. One of the ways that linoleic acid, or the byproducts of linoleic acid, specifically 2-AG and anandamide, Tucker Goodrich probably talked about this on your podcast, can affect human satiety is through the cannabinoid, specifically the CB1 receptor in the brain. So the cannabinoid was receptor 1 in the brain. And there's some pretty strong mechanisms here. So if you stack the cards against yourself, if you tilt the floor far enough, good luck not overeating, because you are literally tickling physiology that affects your satiety in the deepest regions of your brain. So long term, it's going to be very hard not to overeat if you are sabotaging your satiety impulses in the brain, in the hypothalamus, at these CB1 receptors, with some of these breakdown products of linoleic acid. That's at least been shown in animal models. So I think that's a real key of this also, is that people will eat junk food and then they overeat. And that we also know that these polyunsaturated fatty acids can affect the way that fats are metabolized. They may even affect the basal metabolism, the basal metabolic rate of humans at the level of the mitochondria. Yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff what they can do. So that's the hormonal effect of that one specific fatty acid that I worry about. And just circling back to finish your question, I think that as humans, when you look at these hunter-gatherer tribes, the best analysis we can do suggests that 2 to 3% of their calories, closer to 2, were from linoleic acid. Today, we have 10 to 15% of our calories from linoleic acid. So just like all of the other, quote, hormones in our body, there are probably delicate levels and signals from the environment. So one hypothesis that I think is quite compelling might be that when we get above this level, this 2 to 3% of linoleic acid, things go off the rails. So avocado oil can have 15, 17% linoleic acid, corn, canola, 20 to 30, 35, grapeseed, 65, soybean is 45 to 55% linoleic acid. So you just don't want to push that linoleic acid too high. Tallow, butter, 2% linoleic acid. And I think most humans would do better, especially if they're obese, to limit the amount of linoleic acid in their diet as much as possible. And then if they can get the other good nutrient fats from animal fat, things like stearic acid or odd chain fatty acids, then you're doing a good benefit. So it's like you're losing benefits of stearic acid and odd chain fatty acids in animal fat, which are not really found in large quantities in many plant foods, a little bit in cacao butter, but not many other plant foods have these fats that are primarily found in animal foods. So you're missing the good stuff, and then you're sort of creeping up and filling that bucket that starts to overflow with a potentially damaging hormonal influence, quote unquote, from this linoleic acid.
I know you're enjoying this clip, but listen up. We have this beef company, Piedmontese Beef, that no matter what diet you're doing, whether it's low fat, high fat, carnivore, keto, whatever, they have perfect cuts that are going to fit your diet perfectly. And the cool thing, Andrew, less connective tissue, so you're not going to have those gristly, nasty things that you have to spit out when you eat beef.
That's what those are?
That's what those are.
Oh, and Piedmontese doesn't have that.
They don't have that because the cows are jacked, lack of connective tissue, buttery when you cut into it. Amazing taste. So, Andrew, how can they get some Piedmontese?
Yes, sir. It's over at Piedmontese.com. That's Piedmontese.com. At checkout, enter promo code POWER for 25% off your order. And if your order is $150 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Again, that's at Piedmontese.com, promo code POWER. Let's go ahead and get back to this podcast. We were talking earlier before the podcast got rolling, and it's of my opinion that when I was younger, a lot of these like seed oils and all this other bullshit wasn't quite as involved in our diets from day to day, and I could be wrong, but it seems like today, like you cannot avoid a lot of this bullshit no matter what you eat. But my question is, how long have like seed oils and all this other stuff, has it like infiltrated our diets on a regular basis to where when you go to the store, literally everything you pick up is going to have some form of it?
Yeah. So the first seed oil was created 1910, sometimes the late 1800s. You guys probably know they were machine lubricants before this. So we had like a shtick here in the grocery store that we'll probably repeat in the United States, where I took a seed oil, I took some soybean oil off the shelf and I moved it over to the automotive parts section and put it on the shelf and said, I don't know how this got classified here in the food. It's actually machine lubricant. So these were machine lubricants. And then Crisco in 1910 or 1911 created this oil. And there's an interesting rich history there that Chris Kenobi can enumerate better than I can. But then they've just slowly infiltrated our food supply further and further and further. There's an interesting thing to consider that in 1900 or 1905, probably 99% of the fat that humans ate was tallow, which is essentially rendered animal fat from cows, butter, and lard. And it's hard to know what those pigs were eating, but all of our fats were animal fats in 1905. And this is an association. We can't draw causative inference, but there was a much lower rate of all of our chronic diseases, 115 years ago. And all of the fat we ate, 100% of the fat we ate was animal fat. If the hypothesis that animal fat, saturated fats especially, are the major driver of cardiovascular disease is true, then I'm not sure how that association could have been present historically.
I'm actually curious about this because, well, the way I grew up, like my mom cooked really healthy, but she used a lot of canola oil. And in Africa, there's this oil called palm oil. Have you ever heard about it? Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of palm farms here in Costa Rica, actually.
Yeah. So I'm just actually, this is totally from an aside, but what are your thoughts on palm oil? Because I know a lot of people that use palm oil heavily in food, especially cultural food. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you know anything about it?
Let's look up the palm oil.
It handles heat really well. I know that. It's like a little bit like coconut oil, I believe.
I don't personally use it much, but I have a lot of family and a lot of people from other cultures.
I think it's one of the less offensive ones, but I'm not sure. I could be way off.
I think it is. If you look at it, the composition of fatty acids, I'm looking at it right now. So it's 9.1% linoleic acid, according to this article, 36% oleic acid, which is the monounsaturated fat. It's 4.3% stearic, 43.5% palmitic, 1% myristic. So you have probably about 50-50 saturated, monounsaturated with 9% linoleic. So it's much lower linoleic acid than almost any other seed oil out there. So you can see the composition, and it's very interesting.
Yet another reason why Nsima is so jacked.
Palm oil is probably better. It's
better,
not
but
quite
not
as
ideal.
saturated as coconut oil.
Yeah.
Oil
much less linoleic acid than canola.
Maybe just avoid oils in general. Is that a good rule? Like even olive oil?
Well, that's what I do. That people find that position to be pretty controversial. I was joking with my friend Andrew Huberman recently, and he said, I've got some avocado or olive oil. And I said, why would you use that? Why would you not use tallow? And he said, well, those are hard to put on a salad. And I was like, why would you use salad?
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
You're eating leaves, dude? What kind of shitty hunter are you? Why would you eat leaves? So yeah, I mean, tallow doesn't go on salad very well. It also, it melts just fine. You can put it in any dish you want. You could put tallow on your sweet potato if you wanted, just like you could put butter on your sweet potato. You can melt tallow on a steak, just like butter. But yeah, you can't pour tallow onto your salad. But then again, I'm not a big fan of salad, so it doesn't present a problem in this world.
Power Project family, a lot of the guys in the audience said that they hate me whispering, so I won't whisper anymore. I'll just whisper here again. So go ahead and comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and check out all our sponsors here in the bio or the description. Okay? All right? Bye.